You understand what that means? It basically means that there's a lie and a game that's being run on you. And that game is that somehow the European didn't benefit from slavery, that the African began the slavery, but at the same time, the European ended the slavery against the Africans, putatively the Africans, we suspect the Africans who would have been trying to defend it in West Africa, and the British had to go in and fight them. What they don't tell you is that West Africa squadron was small. You saw it yourself, only a couple thousand soldiers, right? At any one time, it was a small dedicated force. And they were fighting in West Africa, and about 20% to a third were actual Africans who were responsible for going ashore and making sure things got done as needed to be done. So those sacrifices came in the way of yellow fever, where the European would catch and die, not through direct contact with the enemy, not through direct warfare. So, I mean, that's just an incidental. You call it a sacrifice. And I guess you may call it a sacrifice if you understand that yellow fever can be the end of you and you go in there anyway. Yeah, that can be said and that argument can be made. However, it's much more prudent to say that nothing really happened to any Englishman, not really, in trying to liberate those slaves. Nothing happened to them, right? As usual, they sent their African soldiers ahead of them, and those are the guys who took all of the risks. And in case you doubt what I'm saying, if you doubt what I'm saying, then you've only got to look it up. So why would stupid Nigel Farage, the panderer, the liar with no chin, with no backbone, with no back, with no balls, why would he feel the need to rise up and say that? Why would he need to rise up and say that these people wouldn't grab any visas? I mean, let's just continue with the article, man. Reforms policy proposal comes a fortnight after the United Nations General Assembly backed a resolution declaring the transatlantic slave trade the greatest crime against humanity. The resolution also emphasized that reparations claims represent a concrete step towards remedying historical wrongs against Africans and people of African descent. It was adopted by 123 votes to 3, with the UK among the countries that abstained. You want to talk about visas? If the UK gets banned from doing business at all in Africa, how much money does it think that it stands to lose? It's got tens of billions of dollars, tens of billions in dollars worth of business doing in Africa. Much more than it provides in any meaningful way in the form of aid, one might add. So this idea of aid versus profit in Africa, yeah, you have to kind of be wary of that. All right. I mean, we can get into that. That is not a problem. Let's just look here. The UK's economic relationship with Africa is defined by substantial trade and investment and returns that significantly exceed the aid it provides. In 2024, while the UK provided roughly 1.89 billion in bilateral aid to Africa, it recorded nearly 25.2 billion in revenue from exports to the continent. Did you hear that? While the UK provided roughly 1.89 billion in bilateral aid to Africa, it recorded nearly 25.2 billion. So whatever it is you claim that you're giving, you're making back times 12, times 13. You understand that? Financial returns to the UK 2024-2025. The UK makes money from Africa primarily through trade surpluses in services, corporate profits, and investment returns. Trade revenue. In 2024, the UK exported 25.2 billion in goods and services to Africa. Now understand that within its actual business portfolio, Britain has about probably 70 billion, 50 to 70 billion. So between a half to a third, that is between a third to a half of all of its money is generated in Africa. These are the people who want to sit there and tell you that they're going to ban African countries seeking reparations, or even Asian countries seeking reparations. This is Nigel Farage and how stupid that no chin, no neck having fool is. That stupid long neck, skinny little Diplodocus is going to tell you that he's about to come in and stop all of that money. Because you see this idea that we're going to threaten the darkies with expulsion, we're going to threaten them with the revoking of their visas, but they're going to allow us to continue to enter into their lands and make 25.2 billion pounds off of them every single year, despite the fact that we only give them 1.89 to them every year. In aid that falls into the pockets of their leaders that we put there in order to help manage our continued desolation of the continent. The money never actually gets back to the people. Yeah. So that 1.89 billion, the African sees precious little of it. And then in the name of that, you should be allowed to go into the continent of Africa and extract 25 billion. 13 times more than whatever it is you put in, even though these African leaders take that 1.89 billion, put it in their pocket, and then they come out of there and then do business and they spend that money in Europe, in America. So the money goes right back into the economies of America and Europe, in addition to the money that you've made off of the Africans. And then that so-called debt of that 1.89 billion, supposedly having to be paid back, some of it, right, is then shouldered by the taxpayer of Africa. Yeah. But you are going to talk about banning those people coming from those countries from getting visas. And what happens if the African decides to ban you from making up to half of your income? I mean, we don't need to sit here and invent that much, because it's not by force. We just lie to each other all day. Anyway, we move. The UK maintains a significant surplus in services, banking, insurance, legal, exporting 15.2 billion whilst importing only 8.6 billion. Investment income, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the good. Oh yes, illicit. UK-based firms are heavily involved in Africa's £1 trillion resource sector, with the UK government-backed British International Investment, BII, increasing its African portfolio by 40% in 2024 to 1.9 billion to secure critical minerals. Research identifies the UK as a primary destination for illicit finance for the global south. We know all of that. Illicit finance. Africa loses an estimated 88.6 billion. That is 71 billion annually to illicit flows, largely through tax evasion and aggressive tax planning by multinational corporations. That, of course, does need to be clamped down on, and those responsible, obviously, penalized. The UK has been cited as responsible for more tax losses linked to the IFFs than any other nation due to its network of tax havens and professional enablers. Now, we're going to say all of that to say the following. This is not a game that Britain wants to play. If we start playing that tit for tat based upon ego, emotion, and the desire to pander, we're going to find ourselves in a very, 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 very funny situation very quickly. Because what's going to start to happen is, as Africa grows more independent and more determined to self-determine its outcomes, what's going to happen is that it's going to start reciprocating.